Welcome to episode 68 of the Necronama.com. But first, a word from a sponsor.
I love Basco. It's rich in chocolate tea. Chocolate flavored Basco is mighty good for me. Mama puts it in my milk for extra energy. Basco gives me iron and sunshine vitamin D. Oh, I love Basco. That's the drink for me.
I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm going to have my mom buy chocolate syrup when she does the shopping.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And this movie is one of the many reasons why I did not stop at any of the motels when I was doing any of my cross-country trekking and road trips.
So joining us today is our good friend Shelly Grant, who returns to us once again, having done Parasite with us. We don't have drunk Brian with us in the background today, though.
It's probably for the best.
So Shelly, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You want to tell our audience a little bit about you and the podcast and whatever else?
Sure. My name's Shelly Grant. I'm the co-host of BS Movies podcast. I also help host and curate some things at the Film Bar Phoenix, which of course is closed right now thanks to everything that's happening in the world. But something I have been working on is Film Bar Online. They've transferred to an online platform during this time. So if you still want a Film Bar experience, you can see that online. And I host and introduce a couple of the movies that are available to stream for free through that service. So it's filmbar.online if you want to check that out.
Very cool. And, I know Don hasn't had the opportunity to go to the Film Bar, but it's one of the things I desperately miss in these times.
Yes.
And, I want everyone out there to know that once this shit finally ends and you're able to come back, hit the Film Bar because it is the coolest experience. It's this little, what's it hold, 75 people?
Yes. Well, and the exciting thing is, and of course this happened right before COVID, they walled off sort of the back part of the lounge and have created sort of a micro cinema in there that's going to seat about 30.
I didn't know that. That is cool.
Yeah. So they have a second screen. So, which is now, thanks to COVID, it got to get completed pretty well. So, we'll, once it's back and up and running, we'll have that too. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
But the main auditorium seats about 75.
And they have the best tamales. So, I mean, that's. Yeah. Where else can I go to a movie and get tamales? Like, that doesn't happen. I love that. So
yeah,
I know
exactly.
A place.
Yeah, it's a cool
I'm
place.
Sure you do. So, Don, what was the last movie you saw in the theater?
I think it was Invisible Man. Either that or it was Sonic the Hedgehog because they were around the same time.
Nice.
Both exceeded expectations.
Yes. My last two pre-COVID. Because I went to one after, but I know it's Shelly's answer, so I'm not going to steal that one. My last two were Invisible Man and Guns Akimbo, which I saw at the Phoenix Film Bar. And, when I watched Guns, I was so excited that I watched it there because the audience was like really into it and cool. Mm-hmm. And man, like the idea that was the last time like that, fucks with me so bad. But yeah, so Shelly, tell me about the last time you went to a movie at the theater.
Well, last movie I went to at a theater was with you, James, and your good friend Vincent, and we watched the awesomeness that is Killjoy, the 90s urban slasher killer clown movie. Is that how we describe it?
I don't even know how to describe it, but that's pretty good. Yeah.
And I that can't be the last movie I see in a theater.
I just want to add for anyone who didn't get to participate in that night, we told everyone that we were going to screen American Werewolf in London. And then we got there and we were like, or let's watch Killjoy.
Oh my gosh. But you know what? It was so much fun. I had such a blast watching that movie. I mean, especially with you guys, like just being able to, it just felt so normal because things have been so shitty. It was just like so great to just be with a group of people and sit there and make fun of a movie. And it was a blast.
And that's exactly why I brought this up, because I just want to point out, I feel like if you listen to this podcast, you obviously like movies. Like, I want everyone to know you're not alone in how much you miss that fucking feeling, man.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about something I took for granted. Holy shit.
Yeah, I hit a wall a couple of weeks ago, and I told my husband, I'm like, damn it, I just want to, like, when I get off work, I just want to go see a movie and sit in the dark and not have to worry about my phone or anything else. And I just really miss that, not only just the communal experience, you know, like we just talked about, but yeah, sometimes that's just my way to decompress after working all day. And I just really miss that.
Yep. What about you, Don? You miss it that way too? Or are you pretty happy with your home theater system?
Way to dry snitch on me. No, it's for me, the movie theater was always that escape that I needed. You know, it was, or just movies in general, but more so the movie theater gave me that chance to get away. You know, if you're lucky enough to be in a place that has like good popcorn, because I was I guess I was a movie theater asshole, where I just, you know, I don't even want to be that bougie and say connoisseur, but there were places where I would
absolutely would. Yeah.
There are just places I go, I'm like, I'm not eating the popcorn here because it tastes like this. And then I get really enthralled if some place had like special popcorn. When I was in China last year, I was sending James pictures of like the food that you could get at the movie theater there, along with some things that were like really bad translations. But but you know, I sat there, it's like, wow, wait a second, I can get this when I'm eating. I don't have to have popcorn and XYZ with this. Fresh tea, fresh fruit tea. I was sitting there, I was like, this is awesome. This is how movie theaters should be. And then I came back to, the States and the theaters I went to. I'm like, man, you guys suck. You just have popcorn and like microwavable churros. I hate you.
But if you make it back out to Phoenix, you get tamales at the film bar. So
I know, and I appreciate that. That's why places like Film Bar and kind of the bistro bar type places, I love, because you could get themed stuff. You could get some of your guilty pleasures. It was great. So it wasn't just like, hey, here's popcorn and a Coke. Now shut up.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, so to bring this into the film we're here to talk about, it really comes down to, it's amazing to me that it's been 60 fucking years since this film came out. And not to totally jump in yet, because I'm going to ask you why you chose this film, but that opening shot of Phoenix 60 years ago, I live here. I see these buildings not every day anymore, but I worked downtown before this, like that shot is so grilled into my every fucking day. And it was amazing how much stuff is still the same and how much is different and just shit like that. But
it's creepy.
So then I think about like how people 60 years ago had this same experience we have with theaters, this communal aspect and this, just love of it, right? But it was, and I'm guessing here, because I don't know, I haven't done any research on this or anything, but I'm guessing people didn't go as often as I went, and it's still amazing to me how universal that feeling is, and that's why I wanted to talk about how I know we're all fucking missing it. But so tell me, why did you choose this film?
Well, this is one of my all-time favorite movies, and really just one of those movies that I watch maybe at least once a year, probably twice a year. And I think it's just a timeless movie. The story, even though, like you just said, it was 60 years ago, but it's still some things that we can, I don't want to say relate to, but it's still stuff that happens that, just, it makes it feel timeless. I think the decision that Hitchcock made to film this in black and white really adds to that timelessness to it. Because I think if it was in color, it would maybe take away from some of it, or it would feel more dated than it does, which it doesn't at all. But yeah, so it's one of those movies that I've just always loved, and as I grew up, I'm a kid of the 80s. So Friday nights, my family would go to a video store. I always wanted to rent a horror movie. My parents were like, you can't rent anything rated R. So I kind of found the loophole of the classics. And so that was sort of my introduction to Hitchcock and Psycho. And I just think it's a great movie. Like I said, it's one of my all-time favorites. And I've been privileged enough last year, 2 years ago, on Psycho Day, which is December 11th. One of my friends, Laura Stenzel, she got the mayor of Phoenix to declare it Psycho Day.
Awesome.
And then we screened it at the Film Bar, and I did a lecture on Psycho and how it's impacted popular culture and impacted us since that time, and sort of its influence on stuff. So it's just one of those special movies to me, and one of my touchstones.
That's awesome. You brought up the black and white thing, and I didn't even know that he chose it until probably 10 years ago. Like, I've never thought about that, to me, it's like, oh, it's an old movie. It's black and white. But no, like, color was totally normal at that point. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I absolutely agree with what you just said about how that would date it more.
Yeah, because, his movie before this was North by Northwest, which of course is in that gorgeous Technicolor. And then before that, you have Rear Window. So he's got sort of that 5-year span where I just feel like every movie Hitchcock made was perfect. Because you have The Trouble with Harry, which is also one of my favorites, Rear Window, North by Northwest, just like he's just hitting on every level, every movie that came out.
Definitely. Don, what about you? How do you feel about Psycho? Is it in your top 5?
It's. I'm not going to say it's in my top 5 for this thing. I haven't fully categorized my top 10 because I like to break things down even more. This is my favorite Hitchcock film.
Okay.
And Rear Window would probably be the close second. The Birds would probably be 5, and of course I'm missing a couple other ones. But I like the way that Hitchcock, at least in this story, builds off of an interview that I saw with him. And I can't remember what the documentary was about, but he talked about storytelling, and it was, as an audience member, I have to give you so many clues to make your mind go in so many different directions. I'm paraphrasing. So if like these two men are sitting there playing chess and they all of a sudden blow up, what's the point of that? But if you are they don't know the bomb is there. The audience should know the bomb is there, so that there's some tension building. So
yes,
I can sit here and think, as an audience member, like, oh, are they going to know that it's there? Are they going to run out of time? What's going to happen? So if I show you kind of a cutout or at least an image of the bomb ticking away, that drives the tension, and you sit there thinking, like, stop playing chess. There's a bomb there. Do something. And then when it blows up, I've now I've satisfied the tension that I've built. And I feel like he does that from the very beginning with the music.
Yes.
And I made sure to write music over and over again, because the music for this film, the way the strings are used, the different tempos that they use it's the same as Jaws for me. Maybe something's going to happen. Maybe something isn't. But that music is letting me know I need to be tense right now. I need to be looking for something.
Yeah, even that opening, the opening credits, it just puts you on edge and you don't really know what's going on. You haven't seen anything yet.
Right.
But by the end of the opening credits, you're so on edge because this uncomfortable, just those screeching violins over and over that you don't know what you're in for, but you know you're uncomfortable. And I think it's just genius, the score.
I was reading today that the shower scene originally had no music. And I don't remember the composer's name. I'm sorry. Maybe you have
Bernard
it in your notes.
Herrmann.
Thank you.
Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah. So apparently he wrote the amazing music that happens during the shower scene. And Hitchcock was like totally opposed to it. And then he played it for him and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, definitely. And I really feel like, I don't want to say we wouldn't be talking about Psycho, but I don't think that it would be on the level that it is without this score.
Right.
I feel like it's that important to this film.
No, I agree. It is. It's one of those movies where it's like almost everything. It's just, I just feel like the movie is perfect. Because everything, it just hits on every level between the music, the way the story's structured, which I know we'll get into, how the narrative is structured. It's just like everything just hits on every level.
Definitely. And you were talking about the opening credits, and it's something I had never thought about before until I was watching it today. And like all of the credits split, like it cuts the names up and pulls them.
Yep.
And I was like, holy shit, that is amazing foreshadowing. And no one has any idea that it's there. Like the first time you're watching it, at least. Or the 47th, like me, and you finally pay attention.
Well, no, but it's true. Every time I've watched it, James, there's been something different I take away from it. And I've even gone back and watched it like, I'm going to watch it from this character's perspective. And what are they thinking? And, just looking at it different ways every time you watch it. And you find something new every time.
That's so cool. And I mean, we're not talking about something that came out 3 years ago that we're rewatching, like I rewatch Parasite a lot. Right.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about this film that's been around forever, that we've been watching our whole lives, and we're still finding new stuff.
Yes.
That's why Hitchcock was the god, right?
Yes.
Well, not only that, you didn't have, social media that was, in 1960, obviously. You didn't have social media that could then post their thoughts, their reactions, the Easter eggs that they thought were there on YouTube or on TikTok or whatever. You have to have a lot of this time that's built in it. And even with this film, it's, if you want to see it, you need to see it at the movie theater. Then you have to go back to the movie theater to see it again. If you want to watch it again, maybe hope that it's on a second or third run, or see it on television late at night if it has opportunity to be on television. But I mean, we grew up in that great period of the 1980s where video stores were, the thing, the place to discover stuff that you would have missed otherwise.
Yeah, we had video on demand.
Yeah.
Well, the video cassette had to be behind the box, though. Otherwise, you're.
And that's the worst feeling in the world, right there.
The devastation that kids today don't understand. Another interesting thing, kind of going on with your point, Dawn, of like, there was no social media. I think one of the genius things Hitchcock did too in marketing this movie was he made it very clear that no one was to be admitted after the movie started. Okay. Which was unusual for that time because, movie theaters were open and people would be like, oh, I'm going to go see a movie. And they would just pay and go in. Sometimes in the middle of the movie, they just let people in. Right. So Hitchcock kind of took this. And if you watch the trailer, he even talks about that. The trailer is not a traditional trailer. He's walking around the set of the Bates Motel and kind of talking about these murders that happened at this hotel and this weird house in the background. And that was one of the points, though, at the end of the trailer. So he kind of was one of those original build up this like you can't miss it, build up that fear of missing out, the FOMO, that people then were trying to get to the theater to see this because they wanted to see, what is Hitchcock talking about? What's this movie going to be?
Yeah, I loved how that got people like lined up, which was also really unusual at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like, talk about great advertising. Like, what's everybody in line for?
Right.
Like, wow, man. I look at him and I look at William Castle, and I'm just like, I would love to have hung out with these guys and just heard their thoughts on this shit, man.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely taking a page out of Castle's book of how to kind of build up this buzz around a movie. And so because we have this leads up to like 99 when the Blair Witch Project came out, and how that was like the early days of the internet. And those guys were just genius at kind of building up this whole mythology that it was like you were just so afraid of missing out on this movie. I remember for that going and standing in line to get tickets for it. Because there had been so much buzz. They did that special on, I think it was like the Sci-Fi Channel or something, like the, so, but they, if Castle and Hitchcock hadn't done that before, those guys may not have thought about it. They just kind of hit it at this different wave in time.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we're still using those same techniques. Don posted a meme on Facebook recently about, I don't remember which movie, it doesn't matter. And Netflix was like, one of the scariest movies ever, blah, 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 blah. And
Veronica.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Veronica.
And Don's caption literally just said, lies. And
yep.
And I was like, people felt that way about Castle, or they felt that way about whatever, but even the fear of missing out, like you take something like Parasite or Host. Host is a great example of this. Yes. What I like now is that it's organic. It's not like Rob Savage isn't the one saying, oh, you're going to miss out on Host. It's all of us going, what the fuck do you mean you haven't watched Host?
Right.
You have to go watch Host right now and watch it alone in a dark room on your laptop with your headphones on. Do this right, goddammit.
That's exactly how I've been telling people to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I watched it, and it's why I love Host so much. And anybody who's listened to our episode knows that my wife knocked on the bedroom door at the same time there was a knock in the movie. And
oh my God.
Shit.
Oh my God.
But what I like about it is it's so organic now. It's the audience telling everyone else that you're going to miss out. Right. And I think that's really interesting because we don't do it a lot. You don't get it constantly with horror films. We're not like, oh man, Jaws 3, you're really fucking missing out. Like, we're really choosy about it. And when it happens, I buy into it every time because I'm like, you guys haven't been wrong so far. Yeah. Like, you do it so rarely. It's like once a year, everybody's obsessed with this thing and they can't believe you haven't seen it. And they're right. And I don't really know where I was going with this, to be honest with you. But I do. I really like that it's kind of evolved on its own and it's become something the audience does instead of it being done to us. Because when it's done to us, it's the Netflix thing I was just talking about from Dawn.
Right.
Doesn't work the same way.
Yeah.
So,
I think that, go ahead, Dean.
No, go.
Oh, no, I was just saying, and that's one of the things that is great about this film is that excitement was driven up for it and it wasn't hype. Because here we are again, 60 years later, the film holds up. This story holds up. The twists hold up. And I don't even want to say twist. It's twist, plural. Because Hitchcock pulls you one way and then has you going a different way. And then has you pull. So even as somebody who's seen this movie several times, watching it again this past week, I looked at him like, what the hell's going to happen?
Right.
Or even when they had the remake in 1998 with Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche, I'm like, okay, what are they going to do differently? And they did it. I mean, they did basically a shot for shot remake of the film. And I still was sitting there like, okay, what's going to happen?
Mm-hmm.
What? Okay. I think the only thing they changed was like the money and of course the car because of the time. But I'm sitting there thinking like, well, what is going to be here? You know, that movie didn't live up to the original only because you were basically copying what you had and putting different characters into it.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been interesting to see, at least a shift or a change from the original one, and maybe, I'm sorry, spoiler alert, maybe Norman Bates's mother actually is alive,
Right.
So, at least
Norman's been dead the whole time.
There you go.
That would have been the cool little flip, like
Yeah.
It's Norman and his brother Robert, or Naaman or something. I don't know. Newman.
Actually,
well,
Newman.
that kind of brings me to one of my points I have in my notes. I think, this is, I think what they call a split narrative structure, the way the story's set up, because that first 45 minutes of the movie, it's all about Marion. And
right.
I guess now we're going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen a movie that's 60 years old, I don't feel bad, but
fucking problem. Yeah.
So yeah, you're just all about Marion. You're with her, and all of a sudden, 45 minutes into the movie, she's gone, and now we're forced to sympathize with the character of Norman, who is ultimately the villain of the movie. And I always feel like this is one of the first times you see this in a movie. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree with that? Or can you think of something earlier where an audience is now forced to identify with the bad guy?
I don't know of anything earlier than that. I mean, there have definitely been movies since then.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I don't recall any other. I think the greatest comparison as far as like a big movie, a movie that people know what takes place just from the name because it's been talked about so much, it would have been if you had flipped something like, oh God, what is that movie? The Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
And, it turns out Dorothy's the best. It would have been just,
right.
That would have probably been the only thing because so many people know the story, at least know the overview of what's involved, that it would have been possible. But I don't see this possible in any other film prior. And doing it this way, as far as following Janet Leigh's, Marion's character through the first 45, 50 minutes of the film, you're invested in her story. Like, oh, is she going to get away with the money?
Yeah.
Well, why did she really steal this? Is she stealing this to be with this guy? You start questioning all these things that are going on with her, and then she's done. And like you said, it switches to Norman's story where it's now him hiding the crime that he's committed.
Right.
So, well, and you don't even know that. Like, if you hadn't seen it or you didn't know anything about it and you went into this blind, like, you wouldn't even know that. You would think he's covering for his mom.
Right.
And I think that we lose that. I think it's so ingrained in all of us that it's Norman that we lose that great character thing. And that's my response to your question.
Right.
I can't think of anything where we were supposed to root for the villain before this. That doesn't mean it wasn't there. I'm definitely no expert on a lot of films older than this. But I don't think that there's maybe there's one, somebody will eat me alive for it online. But I don't think there's an example where we were rooting for the villain and didn't know he was the villain.
Well, I got one for you, James. I'll go back then. The first horror film of all time, Birth of a Nation. People were turning the real life villains into the heroes and actually cheering them in the theaters, cheering them so much that they went out and joined the Klan.
Right. I love the scene getting back to Psycho, and you're right, James. You don't know Norman is the bad guy.
Right.
So you are lulled into this false sense of like, oh, okay, I was relating to Marion. Now I'm relating to sort of this awkward motel owner. And I think because I love the scene when he's sinking her car into the bog. And he's eating the candy and he's watching. And as the car starts to sink, it kind of stops, and he looks around, and you as an audience member are like, oh no, even though this crime's been committed and it's this horrible thing, but you feel panicked for Norman that this car's not going to sink all the way down. And then when it starts to sink again and Norman's relieved, you feel relieved because it's like, oh, okay, it's going to be all right. Not realizing, okay, he's covering up, because at this point in the movie, you don't know, he's covering up this horrific crime.
Well, and I really feel like one of the reasons for that, and this was very purposeful on Hitchcock's part, in the book, Norman doesn't look anything like Norman looks in the movie.
Right.
In the book, he's a very unlikable. He looks like me. He's an overweight, balding, middle-aged man who nobody likes. Okay, I'm getting too personal here, but I really feel like the reason we have that reaction is because of the casting. It's this good-looking man who we've been told is a victim. Like, we've seen his mother yell at him and how she treats him. And this poor guy just wants to cover this up. And we buy into that even knowing. So I can't imagine when you didn't know, because I don't remember a time that I didn't know the twist of this. I don't know if there was a time I got to watch this blind or not. But even knowing what I know, I have that same reaction. So I have to believe people would completely buy it if they didn't know.
Yeah, because I think Hitchcock cast Perkins because of that, because he's this tall, good-looking, charming young man. And he had done like a couple of movies before this, like mainly cowboy movies. I think he was in Tin Star and Friendly Persuasion. So he had been different types of characters. And I think this is one of the best performances in movies ever. And of course, then poor Anthony Perkins after that gets typecast to just be Norman-like characters almost for the rest of his career, and has a hard time breaking beyond the Norman mold, which is sad because I think he was so talented. But then the cost of that is he was so good, people only thought he could be Norman, and just never seemed to break away from that, which is really sad.
And it happens so often.
Oh, yeah. I think Dawn mentioned the money. I read years ago a critique of Psycho that they were making the point that the money is almost its own character. So in the first 45 minutes of the movie, not only are you relating to Marion, but then Hitchcock has these lingering shots of the money after she steals it. And I've always been really interested in that. And there have been times I've watched the movie just to watch the money, and she's so afraid of like people finding out. Nobody, especially when she's on her drive, from Phoenix to California, nobody has no idea what she's done, but like when she goes and buys the used car, the way she like goes and runs to the bathroom to take the money out, or like when the cop stops her and asks to see her license and stuff, and the way she like fully turns her back to him to go into her purse because he doesn't want her to see the money, but she has it in an envelope. There's like, he wouldn't know, that the money is there. And like, I love the fact that she, when she does go to buy the used car, she pulls out the LA Times to see if this story has made the paper.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you were in Phoenix. It's a crime in Phoenix, but it's not going to make the LA Times the very next day,
Right. Even if it did make it, it's going to be a few days at this point.
Yeah.
Even longer now if you send it by mail.
Right. Yeah. So I just love those sort of lingering shots on the money. So as an audience member, I think it lulls you into thinking the money is really important. And then it turns out to be the MacGuffin, and it's really inconsequential to what's happening in the story, even though that's ultimately what drives like her sister and Detective Arbogast or Investigator Arbogast to come and find her, is the money. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting critique I read, that, the money is almost its own character, because we're sort of being lulled into thinking it's important, and it turns out not to be.
I like that a lot. I've never considered that.
Yeah.
Another character that's not a character is the birds. And I mean, I've always known the birds are very important to this film, but really paying attention to them this time, all these taxidermied birds everywhere. And I started realizing, like, even the music is very bird-like. But what really got me was Norman. Norman moves like a bird. And I don't know if that's intentional or not or what, but like, I guess I've just never really like broken this down before, so I'd never noticed it, but he's very jumpy like a bird. His head like flies to the side and just very jolty. And then of course, you know, I mean, he directly compares her to a bird, the way she eats or things like that. Or Mom at the end is talking about being one of his birds, you know, but like the actual taxidermied birds, I have always known they were important, but this time through, I really felt like there's as much emphasis on them as there is like the money, like you were just talking about.
Yeah. That's great. I had never thought about it that way. So now the next time I watch it, I get to watch it from that perspective. Woo-hoo. So that's awesome. Yeah.
Watching it again tomorrow. No.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, you even had the bird art in the rooms and in the hotel itself or the motel itself. But I think something that's really cool that gets mentioned a couple of times, not just when Norman and Marion first meet, but Marion, when she turns off the road to stop at the hotel, stop at the motel, because there's a difference between a motel and a hotel,
right?
That he explains, you know, hey, you know, we've got 12 rooms. They're all vacant because they built that new highway and now nobody really comes here. And it's really interesting because, again, the historian in me, I'm thinking about, oh, great. It's the Highway Motor Act, Motor Defense Act.
Right.
That results in these highways being built to connect cities. And a lot fewer of the state roads are being used. And you see how some of these businesses just go away. It makes for a perfect opportunity for Norman, though, to have this type of life and to commit these acts, or at least for Mother to commit these acts and for him to commit these acts, because who's going to show up?
Right.
You know, you're not going to have that much traffic that's coming through, you know, as far as car traffic and, of course, people themselves. But you're not going to have anybody coming to this hotel that's really going to disturb you. So he can live how he wants. He can live in this delusion that he wants, and go virtually undisturbed. And, you know, the few people that do happen to come by, you know, it might bring some business, might bring a disturbance, might result in his mother lashing out.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because when she does, you know, when she stops and she's checking in, you know, and she's saying she's hungry, and he was like, oh, well, the diner's 10 miles in Fairvale, which is her destination. So she's 10 miles from where she wants to go. And it's a great little moment between the two of them, because you see her thinking like, well, maybe I won't check in. Maybe I'll just go. And he's like, oh, let me get your bags for you. Like, he just intercepts her immediately. It's almost like he knows, you know, she's going to try to leave. And he's able to kind of get her to stay.
I totally didn't notice that that's where she was going.
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes sense. It's not like she had GPS on her cell phone, you know? And
right.
So, like, if that's the first you heard that you're that close.
Yes.
Like, and I mean, you'd also have, like from a character point of view, it makes sense. Like, you need some time alone to figure this shit out and kind of like, you know, regroup basically. So, right. I mean, it makes sense. Plus she's hungry. So, yeah. But yeah, wow. I didn't realize that, the place with the diner was where she was going. That makes this so much better.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. So I guess we can't talk about Psycho without talking about the shower scene.
There's a shower scene?
There's a shower scene, yeah. Well, maybe we can just skip over that then. No.
Let's talk about
One
the
of the
truly
most
important
famous-
bathroom scene.
Yeah.
Famous moments in cinematic history. We cannot skip that, James.
No, you're absolutely right, Don. There is one of the most famous scenes ever in the bathroom, and it's the first flush toilet in
Yes.
American cinema.
Yes.
It's definitely true. We can't talk about Psycho without talking about that.
Yeah.
But all right, go to the shower scene. I'm totally just being a jackass.
No, you're fine. So the shower scene is so important that it has its own documentary called 7852, which I don't know if either one of you have seen that, but I do highly recommend that, where they break down how the shower scene was filmed and how important it is. But they also talk about some of the other little hints in the movie. So like the artwork with the birds and stuff, they talk about some of those paintings, especially the painting that Norman takes down when he peeps on her. Mm-hmm. There's a special significance to that I can't remember off the top of my head right now, but in the documentary 7852, they go into it. And I think the way that is shot is in such a way that it becomes a psychological trick in your mind, because you can talk to people who feel like that scene is way more violent than it actually is.
Yep.
They're insistent you actually see the knife go into Marion's skin. My mom was 16 when Psycho came out, and she saw this in a theater on a date. And she said she was so tensed up and terrified that she just left her nail marks in her date's arm. She was just gripping him so hard through that scene.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's, I think that, it's impactful for a lot of reasons. Also, you're only 40, 45 minutes into the movie, and now you've totally lost the main character, like we've talked about. And now you're like, well, where's the rest of this movie going? I knew I was uncomfortable. Something was going to be wrong. I knew I was uneasy this entire movie. Now this horrible thing has happened. Where do we go from here? And I think it's just genius. And James, I'm not going to step on your toes because I know you want to talk about the blood in that scene, as we were talking about earlier. But this was one of the reasons why Hitchcock chose to film this in black and white.
Yeah.
Was because he felt like fake blood looked obviously fake. So he chose to use something else, which I'll let you talk about.
Chocolate syrup.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's right. 100%, as always. Well, as always, when it comes to film, not so much in how he treated people. All right. So anyway, but no, the chocolate syrup is fantastic even today. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm watching the shower scene. I'm watching the detective whose name I can't remember. These scenes. Yeah. And these scenes where blood is spraying or going down the drain look fantastic. And I will say the shower scene is the one thing I would say doesn't hold up. But when I say that, I mean compared to the violence we're used to, right?
Okay.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is if my kids watched the shower scene, they'd be like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? Whereas for us, it's iconic. And for like your mom, it's apparently traumatic.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's really the key with this scene. Like when we say that this movie holds up, I 100%edly believe that this movie could have fucking come out today and the shower scene would be the only thing that would pull people out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And that's because of how it's shot. And it's because of what we're used to now. But at the time, phenomenal. These cuts, what is there? There's like 50 different cuts or something like that
Yeah, that's why it's called 7852. I think it was like 78 cuts, 52 shots or something like that. That's where that numbers come from. Yeah.
Nice. And I mean, it took something like a week to film. Mm-hmm. And what's amazing to me is I've seen this film probably 30 times throughout my life. maybe more. I don't know. And in my head, it's exactly what you talked about earlier. There's the knife stabbing her. There's blood everywhere.
Right.
And I think that I always call it the Anakin Skywalker effect, because when Anakin walked in and just lit his lightsaber and doesn't show us killing these kids, was so much worse in my head than if they had just slaughtered all these young Padawans on screen.
Right.
And it's the same thing for me. Not showing me the knife going into Marion, not showing me her getting beheaded like she does in the book. You know, like it's more traumatic to me, and it's ingrained in me that it's actual stabbing. And I feel like that's probably what happened to everyone. But again, if my kids watched it today, they would be like, what the hell were you guys scared of with this?
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that I feel maybe doesn't hold up.
Okay.
What about you, Don? Am I totally wrong?
I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Yes!
Respectfully disagree. I think it holds up because it's not a goofy kind of, I can pick this apart because I'm looking at the knife and, you know, I can see like some prosthetic or whatever. I think it's so well shot that not seeing the knife make contact gives you the impression that it made contact because the cutaways are so quick to the other angles, to the other cuts. It's done so quickly, so precisely, where it's kind of like, oh shit, oh, she's stabbing the hell out of her. Oh my gosh. And you don't need all that blood, because even after she's dead, even after Marion is dead, and Norman is going in to clean up after, shouldn't even jump that far ahead. But when she's got her face planted against the tile on the floor,
man, I love that shot.
That is a gruesome shot, because you sold me on that she's dead in the shower. Yeah. You got me. And then you add to that when Norman, has that argument with his mother, and then he comes back to clean up the scene, and he has to drag her body out of the room and onto the shower curtain. And you're sitting there like, that's the whole scene. It's not just the stabbing. It's this whole thing of she's getting killed. She's getting murdered. Body collapses. Then someone has to clean it up. So it's this big procession, as opposed to, some films where you see somebody get stabbed to death or whatever. And then, next thing you know, they're digging the grave of the person or dumping dirt on top of the grave that they've now covered up. This, you see the full madness of him on display before you really know what's going on, but of what he's having to deal with. Like, I don't want my mother to get in trouble. I need to go do this. I've got to deal with this. And
that's one thing that I think is fantastic, is it drills in the love of his mother.
Yes.
And we just don't understand what that love actually is at this point. But it's amazing to me how this misdirect of him covering up for his mom actually makes you understand the reality of the twist better. Like, that's fucking masterful. I don't know. I wish I could write something that good. But I write about fat kids getting killed. Oh.
Well, in this, the shower scene kind of takes me back to an earlier point that I kind of skipped over. But I think in this, it winds up changing horror movies forever, because we talked about William Castle a little bit ago. So the horror movies of the 50s were sort of these monster movies, and really not
right.
These, you had noir films and you had murder mysteries, but nothing on this level. And especially for the 50s, because it's about this man who is sexually repressed and winds up acting out when he desires a woman because of the control his mother has over him. So I think it's challenging to those social mores of that time. But then it also sets us up for what becomes the slasher movie. So moving forward, when you have 1971's Bay of Blood, which is, some would argue, is the first slasher post-Psycho. '78's Halloween, which a lot of people say is the first slasher, which of course then stars Jamie Lee Curtis, whose mother Janet Leigh is in Psycho. So I think this really sets everything up and changes movies. So I think it's just one of those moments in history where you have movies before Psycho and you have movies after Psycho.
I would definitely agree with that. It's a total game changer. There's no other way to put it. I want to go back. You kind of mentioned the peephole.
Oh, right.
You know, when I was rewatching it today, my first thought was they shouldn't have done that because it kind of shows what a creep he is. And the more I thought about it, the more I was the exact opposite. I'm like, this is so great because it makes him pervy, right? But it doesn't make him a killer. It doesn't make him a bad person.
Right.
I mean, you know, as bad of a person. But like, then it also feeds in so heavily to the end and the guilt because the reason that mom kills people is his attraction.
Yeah.
And like, what a great layered way to do this. And I don't know if this part's in the book. It's been 125 years since I read it. I'm very old.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, it really amazed me how I had that initial reaction of pulling back and going, oh, they shouldn't have done that. That tips too much, but it doesn't. It tips too much because of what I know.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was curious if either of you had reactions like that or if you ever thought about it or care at all. I could just edit myself out of this episode.
No.
I'm thinking. I'll let Don go first. I'm mulling this over.
I think the peephole helps, not necessarily as far as framing him as a bad guy, but the peephole helps because it puts you in that, I don't even want to say the 1950s, 1960s mindset, because there are a lot of movies that you see that are based in the 1950s or 1960s, and it's that sexual curiosity gets aroused by a pretty girl being nearby. You know, I know on Porky's that they like hollowed out like some of the pipes or at least some of the area in the showers so they could go peep on the girls taking showers. And there are a number of other, Revenge of the Nerds, like they put closed circuit cameras in the sorority house. So there are all these moments where it's either 50s or reminiscing on the 1950s and looking back on them. And
even really fast, even Back to the Future, that's what George McFly was doing when he was supposed to get hit by the car.
That's true, right?
And it's that sexual curiosity because, well, one, you're told you're supposed to wait until marriage, or at least these social norms and mores that you're supposed to follow, that everyone's telling you is the right way to be, but you have these urges that are making you not necessarily want to follow those rules. So I have to do this in private. If I want to see a girl naked, I maybe go buy a magazine, but that's not real. There's this real woman here I can actually look at. So it's I don't even want to say it makes me feel like he might be a little bit creepy. It just makes it seem like this is where people were with their sexual repression.
Yeah, I
mean, it's definitely creepy. But
well, no, and it is creepy, but there's something, and I'm sure in the novel, because Bates is portrayed so differently, it comes off as way pervier and creepier. I've never read the actual book, but Bates, Anthony Perkins, is so sort of charming, and you've had this moment with him and Marion where you realize he's just sort of this lonely guy who's kind of stuck. And so this is a way, I can see a real woman and she's very attractive. So yeah, it's creepy, but I think you're right, Don. I think it kind of shows that sexual repression of that time, and especially the sexual repression of Norman, because as we learn, his mother just really controlled that he just felt any thought of that was obviously so wrong, and he was gonna be in dire trouble for even feeling this way. That it shows that. So it's creepy, but I think it also kind of helps you understand Norman a little bit.
So two things come to mind. The first is I kind of feel like we give Norman a pass because he does seem more innocent, you know?
Yeah.
And he's got mom yelling at him. And so he's kind of an overgrown teenager. And any teenage boy would do this exact same thing, right? So I feel like the audience gives him a pass. And my part two to that is also about giving him a pass. And my question to you guys is, if Marion was not portrayed as somebody hooking up with somebody at the beginning of this film and showing in her bra a couple times, first it's white, then it's black because she's not as innocent anymore, right? And if she wasn't shown that way, do you think that we would still give him this same pass? Like if she was an innocent person and we thought she was a virgin, and I'm not necessarily saying us, but the audience of the time, do you think that changes the level of pass we give Norman for looking? Like, are we okay with it because she's not a virgin?
I'll
Wow.
pass it on to Shelly.
Yeah.
I'll go, guys. Ready? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I think that's an interesting point. I hadn't quite thought of it that way. But yeah, especially of that time, you know, Marion is, the opening scene is, you know, she has rented a hotel for the afternoon to be with her boyfriend. And, you know, they're clearly in the afterglow. So yeah, I guess from sort of that 50s, early 60s standpoint, this shows she's a woman of loose morals. So yeah, maybe that's it, that maybe we're a little more sympathetic to him because we know she's already willing to put herself out there, which of course does not make it right in our way of thinking now. But for that time period, I think that's a good point. I hadn't quite thought of it that way.
I hadn't either until this discussion. So
yeah. Don, it's your turn.
I was gonna say, from a 2020 standpoint, or even, you know, late 80s, early 90s, when I watched and rewatched this film, I don't see her as having to be innocent to get that respect. But I could completely see a 1960s audience looking at this and saying, like, well, you know, she's not a virgin, she's not innocent, you know.
Right.
You know, I'd or just not even looking at it that way. I'm sure there would be men in the audience that would say, you know what, I'd be looking too. If I have access to this, I'd check it out. Whether this happened to be a 1960 audience or a 2020 audience, because I don't think everybody would be rationalizing it to determine her worth as an individual, as to whether or not she was deserving of that respect and that privacy. You know, a good number of people would have just looked at it as, hey, here's my chance, here's my opportunity, I'm going to take it.
Right. Well, but also going back to her morality too, she's a thief too. She's right. Not only not a virgin, but she's also a thief. So you kind of have that, as Randy says in Scream, you know, you've got the sin factor. She's had sex and she's committed a crime.
Yep.
Right.
So.
Well, here's the question I have. Has she committed a crime? Because the guy, you know, that she did not deposit the money for, exchange the money for the check, you know, the real estate agent, her boss, as well as the man who was bringing in the cash to buy a house with cash, they both were like, we don't want to involve the authorities. No big deal. Just bring the money back, you know, and everything will be fine.
Right.
So does a crime exist if a crime hasn't been reported?
Well, it's a good point, too, because she even tells Norman at the end of their conversation, she's going to go back to Phoenix. So the implication is she's realized what she's done, like this isn't worth it. And she's going to go back to Phoenix and give the money back. Because then, of course, there's the scene before she gets in the shower where she's figuring up, you know, she had already spent some of the money to buy the car.
Right.
You know, so that's a good point. Has she really committed a crime, or because it hasn't been reported and she's going to, you know, the intention before she gets murdered is she's going to take the money back.
I mean, I think that she's committed a crime. I just don't think anybody cares. Like, as long as it all works out, you know, like if they get their money back, if all that. But I mean, at the end of the day, she still took the fucking money and left.
Yeah.
And she spent some of it. So, yeah, I think she did. But my question would come back to the wording at the beginning on that. And I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not watching it right now, you know, but like,
Right.
you know, the boss makes some comment, if I remember correctly, where he's like, "Oh, let's put it away till Monday and make sure you still feel this way." And so, I mean, really, if she got it back in time, like the crime isn't that she didn't go to the bank. The crime
Right.
is that she got in the car and left.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like if she just took it home, she could be doing anything with it. She could be putting
Right.
it in the bank. She could be running away, you know,
Right.
but yeah, I feel like a crime was definitely committed. I just don't know that they care on the level that we would today. Today we'd be like, "Oh, you took a Barbie from a dollar store? The cops should shoot you."
Well, and then that brings me to a point that I think is really interesting, to her on her drive. You know, they show her on her drive. She's imagining future conversations with the people back in Phoenix, between the people back in Phoenix. And I think that's really interesting because, you know, there's been times I've watched it and I'm like, oh, you know, all these people talking. So you kind of think you're getting this voiceover of what's happening back in Phoenix. And then at some point in one of my many viewings, I realized, I'm like, wait, she's imagining these conversations. These conversations haven't taken place because she's just left. Nobody knows the money is gone yet. So she's imagining what is going to happen. And I think it's so interesting, especially when the gentleman who bought the house, who put down the cash, you know, when she imagines him saying, he was like, well, I'm going to make her pay with her fine, soft flesh. And she kind of gets that little smirk on her face. I think it's so interesting because I don't know what maybe her thought or her intention behind that is, unless it's just like, yeah, I finally, you know, I'm going to stick it to the man and I took his money kind of thing. I think it's just such an interesting way because as you watch her facial expression, she's realizing like, oh, my sister's going to be worried about me. Sam's going to be worried about me. My boss and coworker, they'll be worried. But then she kind of gets that smirk when she's thinking about the guy whose money she's actually taken.
Yeah, because he was kind of a big perv and sexual harasser when he came in.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just kind of almost letting her know, like, hey, I got some money if you want to earn it. You know,
almost. I feel like it was pretty direct.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if anybody's creepy, it was him. But a line that he delivered, and I'm paraphrasing here, but when he's handing over the money, he makes this comment about, you know, buying off happiness. And with her, you know, taking the money, you know, that $40,000 is going to, and I did the math and I used one of those conversion things. So the $40,000 from 1960 or 1959 would equate to $350,000 today.
Wow.
Okay.
So it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And just thinking about what you would do if you had $350,000 cash in your bag to just do whatever. I mean, what you could do with it if you were, you know, leaving a bad situation or trying to leave for a better situation. There's a lot of opportunity there. I mean, we can't travel anywhere, obviously, but
right.
But just the idea that this guy is making this comment about buying off happiness, and
Right.
we've all heard that statement about money can't buy happiness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be nothing but trouble for you, you know, no matter what you do. I mean, if it's ill-gotten gains.
Right. But it's also, she's presented with this the same day she's just had this lunch afternoon delight with Sam. And they have this conversation where he's talking about, we can't get married because I have to pay off my father's debts. I owe my ex-wife alimony. And then, moments later, she goes back to the office and she's sort of presented with this way to get Sam out of that. And then she could finally be with Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting, because so she's got these things in her mind as she goes back to the office, and then it's right there, and it's a strong temptation that I think you as the audience have to kind of think, well, if this were me, what would I do? Given this is sort of right there.
Well, and I think that this goes back to the time period as well. Like, she and Sam could have gone anywhere. And how the fuck are you going to find them?
Yeah.
It's not like they're going to check in on Foursquare or whatever kids do today, because my references are all 15 years too old. But, like, they're not going to check in somewhere. They're not going to be, like, posting pictures at the Grand Canyon,
Right.
So really, if she would have gone and got Sam, got in the car and got the fuck out of there and went to like Connecticut, they just live happily ever after. They're just done. So yeah.
What else do we got to talk about?
Well, I was going to ask the two of you if you didn't have that, and I guess kind of revisit it. Where do you think would be appropriate for them to go? I mean, they can go anywhere, but where would be appropriate for them to go to, I guess, be safe from this pursuit that seems like it's not.
I mean, that kind of money, you could have gone literally anywhere at that point, right? Like, but I would feel like if it's just the two of you and you just want to get away, I'd be like looking at a farm in Indiana or something, like something totally different than Phoenix. Far enough away that you're not showing up tomorrow to find me, but like someplace I've never mentioned to my sister, someplace that like nobody's going to go look for me there. I'm not going to San Diego because that's where you'd expect me to go if I had money at that point,
Right. That's interesting. I haven't quite thought, I kind of agree with James that I think, if she had followed through with the plan, if she had made it to Sam, maybe they just run off and just start a whole life.
We're Canadian now.
Yeah. I mean, that's enough money that they could have done that.
Yeah. And you can pay for stuff in cash. There's no credit card transactions everywhere you went or, there's no trail.
Hell, this was still the day and age when you had to go into a bank to apply for things like credit.
Right.
As opposed to do it through the mail or, now it's just, 5 seconds and you've got your credit card, your loan or whatever else you were looking for.
Well, and you also mentioned the highways. So this is also coming at a time that America's pretty open because of the highway system.
Yeah.
So it would have been, they could have traveled through a lot quicker.
Well, I just hit Route 66.
Yeah.
Well, even with the cash that they had, they could have gotten a Levittown home. I know the dad was coming in with $40,000 cash to put on a home, but he was wanting a nice sizable home for his daughter. And
right.
But they could have gotten a home and $8,000, $10,000. Depending on where they're going. And they could have completely changed their names because I don't know what the requirements would have been to to get identification or a driver's license. But it's not like there was going to be a database that was going to have everything listed for them and who they were. Hell, go to Amish country.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have gotten away if she had only listened to her gut when Norman said you're 10 miles from where you're going. She had just hopped back in the car. We wouldn't even be talking about this movie.
What a boring ass movie that would be.
Yeah. That would have been like, oh, she made it. All right.
See that movie where that woman stole money and drove away?
Yeah, just Norman out there giving directions to people.
No, what you want to do is you want to take a U-turn here, go back 4 miles, and then
you can't get there from here. So, it's one of my favorite sayings ever. But no, speaking of Norman, if anybody out there wants to make me some fan art, I would absolutely love Norman at the desk and like a really unattractive fat man, and Norman's just like cabin 12, buddy. So send me that. So
we're gonna get so much fan art now.
Yes. If you send me fan art, I will plaster it all over my social media. Please do it. Anyway, I want to come back to Norman and the let's just call it what it is. His cross-dressing, right? Like, how much do you guys think, and I mean there's no way to actually measure this, but how much do you think it set back society's view of cross-dressing because of this film?
Here's what I got to tell you. I hate to break it to you, James, but it didn't set it back. And this is the reason
that was
why.
My answer, but go ahead.
It expanded people's knowledge of it, but the PSAs that were running in the 1950s and the 1960s against the LGBTQ community were horrendous. Like, they tied gay men to pedophilia. You know, they tied transvestites and transsexuals to pedophilia and sexual violence. Like, that stuff was already out there as far as what these wild claims and accusations. I mean, this was QAnon before QAnon ever existed. But what was really remarkable is at the end of the film, when the psychiatrist comes forward and one of the detectives, the police officer, says something like, so he's a transvestite. And the psychiatrist goes and clearly states, no, he's not a transvestite. Transvestites do this for this purpose.
Yeah.
This man thinks he's actually his mother. So it completely breaks away from that flawed psychological analysis where I think the DSM-4 had listed, transvestites and transsexual as like a psychological disorder. So you've got the psychiatrist in the film clearly stating, no, that's not what this is. This dude's crazy. So you're not even saying like transvestites themselves, there's something wrong with them. He's going straight forward and saying like, no, he's not a transvestite. That dude's crazy. He thinks his mother's in his head. You know what? This is weird because the mother is taking over and she's doing this. And I just love how they deflect from, whether it was intentional or not, deflect from whatever the programming was that was against members of the LGBTQ plus community. If it was intentional, it was masterful. If it was accidental, I love the fact that it was there anyway.
Wait,
nice.
You guys know, because that's not the original ending to the movie. Because the studio was insistent that Hitchcock add some kind of explanation for what Norman did. So they added the psychiatrist scene. Because I think the original ending was it was going to end with Sam sort of attacking Norman in the fruit cellar. And the reveal happens. And then that end voiceover with Norman and his mom. But yeah, the Hitchcock didn't want this. He hated that scene. And the studio was insistent. They were like, no, the audience needs some kind of explanation. And I don't know if that has to do more with the Hays Code, that you have to have some sort of explanation for why this evil has happened, or that it's some kind of whatever. But so I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like that scene in particular. I'm fine with it. But I do think it's interesting. That's not what Hitchcock's vision was. So to your point, Don, I think it must have been accidental. I don't know if it was an intentional way to sort of say that Norman wasn't a transvestite, that he was doing this because of his own psychological issues of thinking he's become his mother.
So, on that note, was fruity the same kind of derogatory term that it is now? Because, like, Mother makes the comment, "Put me in the fruit cellar because you think I'm a little fruity," but it's really Norman, right? So, like, that goes in a big circle for me. If fruity was used that way at the time, and I have no idea. Don, do you know the answer to that?
I know it could have a couple of different connotations. Fruity could have meant that you had something wrong with your head, or it could have been a gay epithet.
Well, and I also like that it could just be that, mom's kind of fermenting.
But then wouldn't she would have been more pickled at that point then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious. Like, I don't know that I've ever paid attention to that line before, and it really stuck out to me today. The "put me in the fruit cellar because you think I'm a little fruity," and I was just like, did that mean what it meant? What it means? Like, if my uncle says it now, I don't know. So
I think it's lost the gay pejorative or related to homosexuality. At least from now in 20. I'm sorry. It lost the pejorative with respect to your mental state, but it seems as though it's kept it with respect to a homosexual slur.
Yeah, and that's the part I was asking about. But yeah. Huh.
Yeah, because I always took it to mean that, she was crazy, when she uses the term fruity, that you think something's wrong with my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's what I liked about. I was wondering if it was a double play on words there.
Yeah, but it could have been. Yeah, I don't know.
Interesting.
Well, another point I want to bring up is that this is based on the murders of Ed Gein in Wisconsin in the mid 50s. So I think that's interesting that this story kind of is our maybe America's start, and maybe not just America, but the start of sort of being fascinated by serial killers and these sort of horrific crimes. And again, being a kid of the 80s, when I feel like those true crime books I read tons of those in middle school. And of course, you have people like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer sort of took over airwaves. And then you go back and watch something like this and then understand, Ed Gein's kind of considered that the first American serial killer. And then he winds up, those murders capture our imagination so much that it influences not only Norman, but then it goes on with Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. So I think it shows sort of, we've always been interested in sort of this dark underbelly of things you don't talk about in polite society. But we're obviously curious about, and I think Hitchcock capitalizes on that. He's being told, no, you can't make this movie. He funds the movie with his own money to get it made. The studio refuses to give him any money for it. And then, of course, it becomes one of Paramount's biggest hits of all time. But he knows, because Hitchcock always looked at the dark side of humans. He knows, no, this is going to be a hit because people are going to want to see this. They're going to want to peep, just like Norman's peeping on Marion in the shower. People want to look at this.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about this movie, or at least our fascination. He understands the fascination that people, because I'm not going to say just Americans, because this is still something that's popular in other parts of the world. Sure. But he understands the fascination that people have with the macabre. And and especially with this idea that, I mean, if you look at Anthony Perkins' character of Norman Bates in this film, he has the boy next door look.
Absolutely.
He looks harmless.
Yes.
Whereas a lot of these movies, you see the creepy. There's the movie 13 Cameras, where it's kind of the same thing.
Yes.
And it's a very creepy guy who's behind the cameras, and so you're sitting there thinking like, oh, of course, just kind of that kind of goofy voice in your head when you're critiquing it. Yeah, of course, the guy who's watching the cameras is a creepy looking guy with very poor hygiene and doesn't take care of himself. It couldn't be Chris Hemsworth.
Right.
And now somebody will probably hear this like, Chris Hemsworth, we need you to do a remake of Psycho.
I Oh,
you know,
man.
and that's the way it always is. And I remember around the time that I saw this movie, we had like a school paper in elementary school, and in the school paper they had one of those choose your own adventure things that they made.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things was, oh, you know, you're running through a forest, and there are two people in front of you. There's a short, hairy old man to your left, and there's a beautiful woman to your right. If you choose the woman, go to the page whatever of the paper, and if you choose the man, go to this page, right? And both of bound, and I asked a friend of mine who fifth or sixth grade who had helped put the thing together. So he said, why was the girl the trap? And he was like, because she's deceiving, because you expect because she's pretty, she's not going to do anything to you.
Right.
Story of my life.
Right.
And I think I was the second or third grade at the time, and I'm thinking like, I didn't say holy shit, but I was like, holy shit, that's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Because you're automatically told, I'm sorry, not automatically, you're told and taught it's the creepy looking neighbor. It's the creepy guy at school or at work or whatever is going to do the harm to you.
Right.
When the fair looking, good looking person is just as capable of doing that stuff. And I think that's the great fascination with this film is he looks harmless, but then you see what he's capable of. And now it's an issue of like, well, shit, who do I trust?
Right.
Yeah, but that's why she falls for it. Like, you talk about the rich guy hitting on her and sexually harassing her. And we all are like, oh, that guy's a creep. Same fucking reason. Yep. The car dealer, we're like, oh, not that guy, But
right.
Anthony looks kind of like Sam does. Or Norman, sorry, looks like Sam does, like we like both of these guys. And so we're still guilty of it. I don't like Mom, I'll tell you that. She is not good looking.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to bring up from a writing standpoint, I really love how, like, you kind of talked about how Marion's there for like the first 40 minutes or whatever it is, but all of the characters are staggered. So like, if you watch the opening credits, it's Marion and Norman, and then what's Vera's character's name? I totally lost it.
Lila.
Thank you. But they come in at such weird points. So like you follow Marion and then she's out like 45 minutes in, but 30 minutes in, Anthony Perkins finally arrives. And then Vera doesn't show up for like, what, 2/3 of the fucking movie almost? Like,
because you have
about 70 minutes in.
Yeah, because Norman cleans everything up. Arbogast is starting to look around, and then it kind of shifts over to Lila and Sam kind of doing their investigation.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me how that totally screws with your expectations as well, especially at the time. Like, if you were in this theater and you see these names come up, like you're used to John Wayne and his two people that are with him through the full movie. They're the top billing, Right. And so you're expecting that to be how it is. And this movie just instantly uses that against you by staggering when people are introduced or how much time we get with them. And I find that just fascinating.
Yeah, because Vera Miles is in those opening credits, and it's, but as a viewer at that time, you're like, well, I thought Vera Miles was in this movie. And then, it's over an hour in, she finally shows up. Yeah.
That's like if I watched something and they said Samara Weaving and she was in the last 5 minutes, I'd be like, what the fuck, man? So, babysitter killer queen, you better not do this to me. Anyway, so, but yeah, I find that fascinating. And I can't think of another film that staggers characters as well. Like, I've seen it done a little bit, but it's just perfectly done in this. Anyway, that's all I had to say about that.
It was a good definitely a good outlook with that. Because I hadn't considered it before. I mean, I typically just think about Janet Leigh is supposed to be the star, and then she's gone.
Right.
Unlike Drew Barrymore in Scream. No.
Right. I had that in my notes that, again, there's Psycho and then everything else, everything that came after Psycho. And of course, Scream is heavily influenced by that, especially with the marketing of having Drew Barrymore be so heavy in the promotion for it originally.
Yeah. She's even on the cover of, I was gonna say the VHS and DVD where, if you've seen the movie, you're like, she's in this for like 2 minutes.
Right.
That's fantastic. I didn't even realize. I don't look at DVD covers and stuff, I guess, and I don't remember the marketing for it. So I didn't even realize they did that. That's great.
Yeah.
Because today I just expect Sydney, So
right.
I'm like, oh, cool, they killed Drew Barrymore,
Oh, cool. That's funny.
That's what happens when you get a Friday the 13th question wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
She deserved it.
Yeah, no. Pay attention. My question for you guys, moving on, how do you guys feel about the sequels to Psycho?
Oh, I'd rather not talk.
Okay.
All right. I'll go. I actually talked about this on social media today when I mentioned that I was watching Psycho because one of my friends, Richard Hill, has never seen it. And he's going to be watching a whole bunch of franchises and stuff that he's never watched and reviewing each one in October. Okay. And literally me and two of my friends were instantly like, don't fucking do it. Don't watch the others. Just watch Psycho. What's wrong with you?
Right.
And I mentioned on there when Psycho 4 came out, I loved it. Right. But now today I would be like, what is this horrible piece of shit, And so I don't rewatch it because I know how bad it is. So I refuse to watch it because it's got to be way worse. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember Psycho 2 or 3, but I definitely remember The Beginning or whatever it was called. It's
yeah.
Psycho 4, The Beginning. The Beginning. Okay, it was
Henry Thomas as Norman and Olivia Hussey as Norma.
And then I have not watched the TV series. I need to. It's been on my to-do list forever, but
yeah, I watched the first season and then I think I just lost track of it. It's something I do kind of want to go back because it was interesting sort of the direction it was taking. And I love Vera Farmiga, so I should just get back to it. Yeah. Yeah, if only we could have
when we do Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, a 6-month quarantine where we could catch up on all this stuff.
Wouldn't that be neat? Fuck you, quarantine.
No, that's what I have to say to people who won't wash their hands and wear masks and pay attention to scientists and doctors.
You want them to start washing their hands now?
No, I'm saying the ones that aren't doing it. Or all the people having their sorority and fraternity parties right now.
Jesus.
All right.
Well, I saw that it was at Alabama this weekend with the full football game, looking like a normal Friday night.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. We're all gonna die.
Yep.
I'm gonna check into the Bates Motel and speed this shit up. Except I'll be in cabin 12, as we discussed earlier. You know what? When you do your fan art, make it me. Please, somebody fucking make me this picture. Have Norman send me to cabin 12 because he doesn't want to fucking see me naked. Hook me up with this picture.
See, now you're going to be mother, so get ready.
Yes, yeah. Awesome, even better. He would just send me directly to the bog. Anyway, I don't have anything left. Do either of you?
No, I've covered all the points I want to. Go ahead, Don.
I don't, but there are quotes from this movie that are beautiful and creepy at the same time. We all go a little mad sometimes.
Yes.
You know how many times that has been used in other films or in conversations with people? Because you say for us, at least in American society, we don't use mad as in crazy anymore.
Right.
So it would just, it so much is lost, with language or linguistic changes or vocabulary changes and meanings. And even that, I guess that internal dialogue that he has at the end, I just see it as beautiful because it's mother saying, like, talking about, oh, I can't let them think it's me. And just going back and forth as far as explaining why she's been doing all this stuff. But I think what was even better than that is the twist that Hitchcock gives you when Loomis and Lila go, or Sam and Lila go to the sheriff's office and say, hey, this guy was up there and, I could have seen it. I sworn I saw a woman, blah, blah, blah. And the sheriff's like, you couldn't see a woman up there. You probably saw something else. Mrs. Bates has been dead. She's been dead for 10 years. She's buried over in Evergreen Cemetery. And so you're sitting there like, oh, shit, maybe she's, if you hadn't seen it before, you're like, oh, shit, maybe she's not dead. Maybe it's obviously somebody else's, though, because as an audience member, you've heard this voice. You've heard, him talking to her. So it's got to be somebody. Maybe she faked her death. So there are all these things that start going through your head as an audience member of what could possibly be taking place. Then there's that search of the house that Lila and Lila has while Loomis is distracted Norman. And you get this understanding that, okay, well, there has to be somebody there. All this stuff is set up. There are clothes here. There's, jewelry, all this stuff that's going on. So the way the film is shot, it starts to drive it home to you like, maybe this woman is alive. Norman carried her down the stairs. Her impression is in the freaking bed.
And the bed's so warm.
Yeah.
Lila makes that comment. Yeah.
It's just beautiful how all this is setting you up. It takes you one way, then takes you another way, then brings you back and has this big reveal where Norman is going to go kill, Lila in the fruit cellar. I'm sorry, Mother is going to kill Lila in the fruit cellar, but now you've seen that there's a corpse there. It's got to be somebody else, and here comes Norman in with that wig and that dress, and I'm like, holy shit, this is still great. 60 years later.
Yeah,
absolutely,
still great.
Yeah,
and the sheriff even says, "Then who's buried at the cemetery?"
Right?
Like that's such a great. I don't know if it's a misdirect. Maybe somebody is fucking buried in the cemetery, and I love that that's never answered because it doesn't need to be. Like, it's so much better
answered.
that.
It's Norman, because Norman says it was rocks or he had a weighted coffin because he stole the body.
He dug her up and took her,
and then put stuff.
That night.
I totally missed that.
Yeah.
Well, God damn it. No.
But I also wonder if audiences at that time, like, even when you watch that scene, you're still not thinking at that point that Norman is the one committing the crimes, or Norman is Mother, that Norman and Mother are the same. So even when the sheriff, you have that reveal, you're still not suspecting that Norman is somehow involved in this. And again, going back to, he's so sort of innocent and childlike, because, of course, when Lila's exploring the house too, she goes in his room and it's still like his childhood bedroom.
Right.
What a great fucking film. Jeez.
Yeah, and I even checked the ratings, and it's still like in the 90s or it's still highly rated. So even audiences that are watching it now still look at it as this holds up.
And it absolutely should be that high. Yeah. This is one of the greatest films definitely ever made.
Well, and what's great, when I did the lecture a couple of years ago at Film Bar, there were people in the audience who had never seen the movie before.
Nice.
So it was really cool to get to do this talk. And in my lecture, I do have a couple of spoilers. So those people left, they didn't get to be a part of the lecture, but I was talking to them after, and they they loved it, had no idea. They had apparently lived in some kind of bubble that they didn't know what the twists were in the movie.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah. So
that's so awesome.
Yeah. So it was so fun to get to talk with somebody that had this sort of totally pure experience with Psycho for the first time, because they didn't know anything going in, which is, I think, just awesome.
Wow. My final thing I want to mention is the royalty check that Hitchcock got from this fucking film, man. So the studio apparently didn't want to give them a big budget, to the point that he gave up his directing paycheck for this.
Hitchcock funded it. He put up a second mortgage on his house and funded the movie with his own money.
Yes, but he refused to take the payment that he's supposed to get as a director.
Right.
And in exchange, they gave him, correct me if I'm wrong, 60% of the gross.
I think that's right, yeah.
And so I don't know if the calculator I used is correct, but I read that he made $15 million off this film, which today translates into over $120 million.
Wow.
And I'm just like, can I get that deal on my screenplay? Thanks.
Yeah.
Like, I was impressed with James Wan and Lee Winnell and the deal they got for Saw, but this blows that out of the fucking water.
That's awesome.
There's a reason he's the master, even if we don't like him as a human being.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up. Go ahead.
That's why you separate the person from the art, just like you separate Norman from his mommy. So
no one can separate Norman from his mommy. Weren't you paying attention? Anyway, so to wrap this up, Shelly, tell us some other films you think that people should watch if they enjoyed Psycho.
Well, I've got a couple. The first one I'm going to mention is Peeping Tom, which also came out in 1960. Have either of you guys seen this one?
I don't believe I have.
Not.
Okay. Peeping Tom is the story of an isolated young man who has some unusual sexual fantasies. Does any of this sound familiar? This movie was directed by Michael Powell, who also directed The Red Shoes and had a pretty significant movie career when he made Peeping Tom. This was released right after Psycho and was panned by the critics as, this is an awful movie. Nobody should see this. This is pornographic, and ruined Michael Powell's career. And now it's kind of taken on this life, again, comparatively with Psycho, because it is dealing with a similar subject matter in Peeping Tom. The young man is a photographer, and this isn't a spoiler, this is in the trailer for the movie and any material, sort of the promotional materials of it, who is filming his victim. So he has a camera set up on a spike, and as he's filming these women, he's inserting the spike into them and killing them.
Wow.
And so this is this one's a little bit harder to find. I think it's out of print. Criterion had a great DVD of it, but now it's out of print, so it's a little bit harder to find. But if you can find it, it's worth watching, especially if you're a fan of Psycho, because there's a lot of similarities there. And it's just always kind of fascinated me that Peeping Tom ruins one director's career or ruins Powell's career. Psycho kind of cements Hitchcock into the legend that he is. Another movie, now to shift gears to Anthony Perkins sort of being stuck in the Norman Bates mold. There's a movie called Pretty Poison that he did with Tuesday Weld, I believe in 1965. I'm going to look it up real quick. or no, it came out in 1968. And he plays a young man who has been released from a mental institution and hooks up with Tuesday Weld, who is a high school cheerleader, and convinces her that he's a CIA agent and she needs to help him save America from his conspiracies that he has in his head of what's going on. And
Cool.
yeah, and then one more, and this is available. So this is a shameless plug for me. This is available right now on Film Bar Online. And I did an introduction for a movie called How Awful About Alan, which is Anthony Perkins again as a young man who was recently released from a mental institution and is suffering from hysterical blindness due to a tragedy that he has witnessed. So those would be my recommendations. If you like Psycho, there's a few others you can explore. And in particular, if you can only find one, I would say find Peeping Tom and watch it.
Very cool. So mine, I'm going to go with Rebecca. I believe it's 1940, 1941. Just a bride basically dealing with the memory of her husband's dead wife, right? Like dead first wife. And I don't want to talk about it too much, but yeah, definitely Rebecca's one of my favorites. And I believe that I watched it around the same time as Psycho. So I think that's another reason that I kind of marry them together. My other recommendation would be Identity. And I'm not going to say anything else about why. Just fucking watch Identity.
Well, and Rebecca is the only one of Hitchcock's films to ever win Best Picture at the Oscars.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Don, you got any?
Right. I got 3.
But you had 4 until I said Identity?
Well, I had that one down. I was like, oh, this bastard. But the 3, because there are several more, but the 3 that I put down, it's 1408 with John Cusack and Samuel L. Jackson.
Great movie.
That recently, it was 2 years ago, I think. I saw it because it was on the plane, and I regretted that I didn't see it in the movie theater, which is Bad Times at the El Royale.
Yes.
You know,
Great
it has
movie.
the same Peeping Tom moments. The you got all these different people in the, because this is what I imagine Psycho would have been like if more people had checked in the hotel because it happened to be out of the way.
Right.
Like, as opposed to, oh shit, I'm lost. Let me just stop here. You know, they're going because they don't want to be seen by somebody. And then one, I had to actually look up the title because I knew I was going to get it wrong because I thought it was something else. Motel Hell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that is a movie that screwed me up when I was a kid because my dad put it on and it was like USA Horror Nights or something like that they used to run on, cable when I guess the rules were a lot looser about showing movies or showing certain things. And I will never forget the ripening process that the farmer had for the products that he was growing. So I don't want to ruin that for anybody who hasn't seen it, but I will say that the last line of the movie is still funny to me.
Great.
Still funny. So I don't even want to ruin that one. I would just say watch that film. The last line, even as a kid, I was laughing. I didn't understand what the hell it meant until I was older, but I still thought it was funny when I saw the movie when I was like 8, 9 years old. I'm like, that's pretty good. My dad's like, do you know what that means? No, I don't, but it's funny.
Jesus. All right, so I guess that about wraps it up. So Shelly, why don't you tell everybody one more time where they can find you online and how to get involved with the Film Bar online?
Well, they can just go to filmbar.online. They're doing free movies right now, so you can watch stuff for free, or they have some stuff that they would, if Film Bar were open, they would be running these theatrically. You can rent those for, $5-6. And then I am Shelly Grant with BS Movies Podcast, and you can find me at Shelly BS Movies on Twitter.
Awesome. All right. Well, I suppose that wraps it up for this week. So thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.